Thanks for being patient, guys. We needed that extra few minutes to figure it out. So tonight we're welcoming Deanna Marincic.
Yeah.
All right. She is the founder and clinic director at Gals Institute in Delafield. Gals Institute is a collaborative group of licensed clinicians providing therapy services, resilience building workshops, one-day events, and support groups in the Lake Country area. And I first heard about Deanna. She had come to my kids' school, St. Paul's in Oconomowoc, last year, and done a workshop for boys and girls. And all three of my kids raved about it. They thought it was the coolest, they loved it, and our principal had nothing but good things to say about you. So I'm excited that you're here tonight to speak to us about building resiliency and self-care, correct? So thank you for being here. Let's welcome to Deanna.
I don't think I need a microphone, I think I talk really loud. But, oh, you do? Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. Our plan was to be here before the pandemic, right? That was our time. And obviously that I had created this program before, but obviously this changes everything, right? It's even more so. And I will tell you, we're in church, but this isn't really the full title of my talk. I kind of changed it there a little bit because it's surviving the you-know-what storm of parenting, right? Great introduction. Let me just tell you a little bit about us. My journey started a long time ago when I was a kid. I grew up in a great family. My parents are great, but like many parents and all of us, they really didn't have the best upbringing, and it affected their parenting as well. I grew up in a family of addiction. My brother was an addict. I had a cousin that was an addict. So there was this family systems issue. And I was one of those really homely girls, except for when I had my hair like Prince and the 3 V's shaved in the back of my head that I thought I was really cool. I had really good self-esteem until the high school ages. But my brother, being a drug addict, he also was gorgeous. He was a model. He was leads in all plays and musicals. He was class president and a musician, so I get to hear his music all the time. But he also was a drug addict, and he also had this charisma, and he sucked the air out of every room he walked into. And it wasn't his fault, that just was his personality and his way to cope with the things that were going on for him. So growing up like that, and anyone else that can relate when you have siblings, is I became very small, and I felt invisible, and I really made some of my own poor choices, and I did not have very high self-esteem. Like I said, I was a little homely, is what my mom and dad would say, and all of those things. So as I grew up and my brother's continued struggles with his addiction, I always knew I wanted to be a social worker. And of course, my parents told me that that was really not a great choice because, social workers take kids out of homes. That's their history and my grandparents' history. But I wanted to help, and I wanted to help my brother. Addiction was always it. I didn't go to college right away. I did a gap year, I guess, which back then was I was a loser. But for the kids this year, now it's a gap year. But I did work on my own. I moved out that day was the 18 in high school. And I did whatever I did and took care of myself. And I paid for my own school and got into school. And I think that was a good experience for me. It built a lot of resiliency for me. I worked in the mental health field. I've worked at all levels. I worked at Rogers Memorial Hospital when it was called that, when it was going to close. If any of you have been around, there was a time that Rogers was going to close. And I was there as an undergrad student doing a graduate placement, and I had the best experience. And then I stayed on, and I ended up getting hired. And I was the substitute teacher because, you're a grad student or you're working on your hours, and you get thrown into these situations where you are a substitute teacher. The units are, if you're a newbie, they're going to test you out. It wasn't exactly that enjoyable, but I did learn something about myself, and I learned something about kids, and girls in particular, because obviously I related to that, and I was still young and figuring myself out, was that here, when we get into a crisis, which right now we all are in this, I believe as a society, we react in crisis, and that is our kids as well. I need immediate gratification, right? Everything is all or nothing, emotions, everything. And we all are kind of used to that too, right? And I think, that's part of parenting. It's really hard. How do you find that balance if you never had the role models to teach you those things? So one of the things I took away from my experience was, and I would talk to my colleagues, is I really struggle with the fact that we're at this crisis. Someone gets put in a hospital. The memory of a child is the locked doors, right? So they're in that. And I'm not saying it's not good, because I believe in it and I refer people who need it, and there is a time and a place. I feel like many years ago when I worked there, the length of stay was 30 days. Now it's 3 days maybe, if you're lucky. And I feel like, what are we really doing? And the parents also then have this in their mind that I just put my child in the hospital, it's thousands of dollars, 3-4 days, and they're gonna come up and everything's fixed. And that's not true, right? Because the whole premise of going into the hospital and breaking that crisis and that chaos is to then be calm and work through the journey. So I always said, like, there's gotta be something different, we're missing the boat. So that's where I really got into prevention. And so I started building and creating prevention programs for girls, started these programs, piloted them in some of the clinics that I was working at. I was very involved in the Oconomowoc School District with OPEF as the president, PTO, Strong Kids for the Y. And a lot of people were like, you should rent that Loft 24 that's not around anymore. And so I had some programs there for mothers and daughters and for kids and for girls. And I created a program in one of my clinics that I use a lot, which is the 5 S's of self-esteem. And so what I would do is these girls would sign up, they were my therapy, scene therapy, and this would just be adjunct. And we would go through all of that, things that are really important to us, that all of us didn't have that guidance, is self-respect and self-worth and self-care, especially today with devices, right? All those things. And so I took that and I made the 5 S's of that program, and I had these girls, and these girls were there, and we integrated art and music and really hands-on. And when it was over, they were like, we want to stay, we want to get deeper, we want to keep doing this. Well, I had another group coming, and I'm like, well, we need a name. And one of the girls raised her hand, she was 14, and she's like, how about Gals? And I'm like, oh, that's so cute. Yes, Gals. She's like, no, like, get a life. I'm like, oh, that's cute. She's a lawyer now, graduated from Madison, which really ages me, and so she could probably come back later on and say, that's my idea. So as I continued my journey, I decided I really love these programs. I started creating more. I now have 4 trademarked, and we would do them in the clinic, and do them in the clinics. Then at that point, I had, my brother died of a heroin overdose in June 2012. He was 45 years old, had 2 children. And I took charge, like I always do, and just fixed everything and took care of everything. And it was expected, you know, one of those things where it's like you think you're ready for it and you're gonna prepare for it, and then when the police officer comes to your door and tells you, you're never prepared for it, and to have to tell kids and that. So my husband, Eric, has been in the military. He just retired from 29 years. And this is when we were dating, and he knew, I'm like, we need to do something. Like, other families can't go through this. Like, my brother could have been helped. And in treatment back then, it was all about fixing the behaviors and not looking at the underneath in our sense of self. And that's what I was saying with these girls. Like, they all, like me, lack this sense of self and this foundation of who they are as people. Morals, values. You ask kids today, they don't know what you're talking about when you say, what are some of your values? What do you mean? What are your morals? What have you been raised with to believe in? It's very different than what it was in the past. And so that's very interesting to me, even back then, and now even more so today. So when my brother died, I really felt like I wanted to do something. I wanted to help kids, and I took a leap of faith, and I opened Gals Institute. So the angel is my brother. And the words are the things that I learned and about myself that I want to share with others. And obviously the Gals Institute, and the Institute being that I wanted to be where a family systems approach. We started with 3 of us in a small little, we like to call it the garden apartment, but it was really the basement of the Lang houses right across from Target, which is very convenient, and moms love that. And we have now grown, and so that was 2015, I'm on my 5th year, and we did the programs, and then we did therapy, and then I had my first school contract. So I believe, like, we need to get into the schools. One of the first things when we were younger that schools cut were social workers, psychologists. There's some schools that only have 1 psychologist for our whole entire school district. And so we have counselors doing therapy that aren't trained to do that necessarily. And so they were starting to do this partnership in tiers like the DPI of like just having partnerships. So because of my relationships with the school in Oconomowoc, I threw my hat in the ring, and then we would do that. And that provides access in the schools for students to get care. It really helps the parents who work, helps the parents who don't have access to with transportation. We go there, we see them, we do families work at our office, or we will Zoom with them, whatever that is. We now have 8 school districts. We grew out of a little apartment, and now we have the whole lower level and expanding to the upper level of a whole house that's in that same little building. So I have a nurse practitioner, a dietitian, several licensed clinicians. I also supervise and train. So like this coming on in this summer, I have 3 grad students and 3 LPCs in training, which are individuals that are working on their hours. And so myself and another colleague that I used to train a long time ago, we train them now. So it's very exciting, and we grew. And with those programs, I found, guess what? A lot of people don't want to send programs to kids that don't have like the research that says it's a guarantee that it's going to be a fix. So a lot of people didn't want to pay for the workshops. So I was giving them free, and of course my husband and my accountant's like, you can't do that, because I still wanted to pay my providers, because one of the things that our programs do, that we're licensed therapists, so we're able to kind of see what's going on with the kids and be able to assist in those situations. And so I was asked to do a talk at the Rotary in Oconomowoc, and I shared my story and my passion and my dream, and someone stood up and said, I believe in what you're doing, I think it's great, I will pay for your 501c3 and help you with your foundation. So that's Gals on the Go project. So now those trademark programs go to the foundation. We have a strong foundation volunteer board. You might have seen our Shopping for a Cause. That was a couple years ago. We have had a mother and daughter luncheon with an interactive, hands-on resiliency building playground. Obviously, last year, the pandemic changed our path. So this year we are doing what's called I always call girls this is my word, cattywampus, like stop all that cattywampus. So we are having a cattywampus mindfulness walkabout, which will be around in Fowler. It's going to be July 10th. And so we do those programs now, and that funds those boxes, and then we also apply for grants. So we've gotten several grants from around Women and Family, Oconomowoc Area Foundation, and some other generous families and organizations. And so now we're reaching into schools. When the pandemic happened and this talk changed, so did all of our other things. And then our foundation had a crossroads of what are we gonna do with getting these programs in schools? We're not gonna be seeing kids in schools. We're not gonna have 100 kids doing things together for a while. So I, during the shutdown, created our Calm, Cool, Capable event into a hands-on 6-week workshop in a box, almost like what we love, those Stitch Fix boxes. I love my Stitch Fix box, or Wannable, right? Like, what's this and that? It's in each individual envelopes. They get all of the art supplies. They get everything, a handbook. We made videos with kids from other schools, special guests, and they get a mentor. So the family checks in with a mentor. It's all Google Classroom. They share their pictures. It's awesome. You can look at it on the website. So we have sent over 200 of those, and we have just piloted in a school in the 5th grade. And so we're hoping now that we'll be able to raise funds to be able to now do the boxes. The great thing about the boxes are great for parents too, is because it gives you tips and tools. So if any of you have 4th or 7th graders, it's free. Go on our website. 6 weeks, come to your house, all the art supplies. And the other thing too is, like, the first thing is already a lesson, which is patience, right? How many of our kids just don't have patience? And so each week is separated into that, and it's like, don't peek, wait. And so it teaches them right in the beginning, like, we're not gonna zoom through all this and see what all the best stuff is, right? We're gonna start with the first thing and go to the next. So that's a little bit about me, and so that's my passion with resiliency, because I feel like that's something we really all need, right? And I believe that all of us probably have our stories of resiliency. Everyone's very unique, and so that's how we are with our kids that we see. So let's just imagine a day like, you can go to the next one. Thank you. I usually tie this into like my day today, which is, I just found out that I'm being taped. Our Journey to Resiliency is being taped. It's a program we do for our foundation. And I thought it was Thursday, and it's actually tomorrow. And so that's one of those things, right? So do you ever have those days, like I just still can't figure out my calendar? I'm trying to get back in. I have COVID brain, right? I was how many of you were like 1,000,000 miles an hour? And I think I was the only one, except for all the kids being in my house, was just like everything just unplugged for a little bit. right? And now it's plugged back in, and it's very hard to adjust to get back to the way it is. So how are we expecting kids to do that, right? I'm gonna pick the battles I wanna fight. If your room isn't clean, maybe that really would have bugged me and that would have been something I was all over before, but now I'm a little bit lenient because I know that one of my kids, I have one more left in school, I have 4, not all mine, that are struggling. So I have to pick that and help with them to build resiliency in other ways. Cleaning their bedroom or making sure everything's off the floor isn't gonna make or break their resiliency, right? But things change, right? And same with getting back into working and the lifestyle and getting back out. I mean, I don't know about any of you, but I see myself, I'm an extrovert, kind of introvert. I sometimes now would rather just stay home. That's not me. How many, right? Where everyone's like, you want to go out? No, I don't. I just want to eat dinner at home. So it's changing, right? And so a day of a life of you, I'm sure you guys all have your story of one of those days, right? We just got a puppy, which was really, like, all the kids are gone now and everyone is this, and then we decided to get a puppy. I've never owned a dog my whole adult life, either has my husband. So we have ruined another child. That's what we said. So I was running late. I'm always super early, and like I could put makeup on and get ready. Obviously, you're seeing me in my raw, because Tucker, our puppy, our teddy bear, decided that the bathroom is inside the house and not outside the house. So I'm constantly dealing with that. So you have one of those days, right? Right? How many of us have those days? And so what makes it different? What is it with resiliency that makes it different? Is that I'm gonna laugh, I'm gonna have a great time with you ladies tonight, and I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna get some extra beauty sleep, because now I realize I have something really big tomorrow, and I can't get my hair done or my gray covered, so I'm gonna have to problem solve that. And so, you just have to move forward. Where some people that would derail them, right? And so it depends on our tolerance, but let's think about this. All of us have had lots of things in our life and our history that have helped us get to where we are today. And so when we're talking about our kids, they don't have that template. Right? And I think we forget about that sometimes. So let's just look a little bit. So obviously, next one. Before COVID, right? The slide that I had before to see you guys. Back then, anxiety disorders are estimated to affect 15.7 million people annually. 1 in 5 kids have a diagnosis of anxiety disorder. Today, the increase of anxiety and depression among adults and youth has skyrocketed. We don't even have accurate numbers yet because we're still in it. Right? We still have virtual learning or hybrid where some kids aren't even in. Many schools have canceled sports still, right? And canceled other things. So some have canceled prom. What something that really we all probably looked forward to or dreaded. But yeah, suicidal ideation has also gone up. I'm really worried, and here's what I'm worried. I'm not just worried about our kids because of the all or nothing and the anxiety, and that leads them to substances. We're seeing a lot of self-harm, a lot of eating disorder behavior, and not eating disorder behavior when I was treating them in the middle school, high school age. I'm talking about 9-year-olds. OCD and the anxiety. So with anxiety, when we talk about anxiety starts a little bit, and then it grows if it's not treated, and it gets really big, and that's what turns into social phobia, panic attacks, OCD. We have kids that are really struggling with throwing things away, right? Some kids were dealing with losses, not seeing family members. So it really is with their brain makeup and that frontal lobe, that it's all that emotional stuff. It's a really tough time. I'm most concerned, so remember this for in the future, I'm most concerned for our frontline workers, our nurses, and also our educators. I just had a call from a school district that a teacher just walked off because they're just so overwhelmed. I just assessed a banker. You'd think, why would a banker be? Well, bankers didn't shut down, and bankers are doing all those PPP loans for all the businesses, which, by the way, everyone is trying to get because many businesses have been affected, and with the forgiveness loan. So this woman has been working like 15 to 20 hours a day since the pandemic, and so it's starting to break for some of these people, and so that's the concern that I have. And actually, there was a really great Primetime, which on the end, there's some resources that you guys can write down. Primetime did a talk with the president of NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness. We have a NAMI here in Wisconsin, but this is the big guy. And he was saying back then, I remember sitting on the couch right when this happened, maybe 3-4 weeks in, where he said, this is what I foresee in the future. And what he said is going to happen is happening. that we are going to see all this and we're going to have a shortage of social workers and therapists. And that's what happened. So remember the time when nursing, like there was not enough nurses, everyone then wanted to be a nurse. This is where we're at now today. So with me expanding and adding, it's really hard to find, I can't compete with Rogers with giving a sign-on bonus to 20,000 hours. I'm not in my business to make money, right? I can't do that. And so it's really hard. And then with the pandemic, I have 4 people leaving. Why? Because of moving, because of husbands with jobs, right? People can do their jobs at home, they can move away. So things are changing for a lot of different people. And so I get concerned. I get concerned for my fellow healers. Because I know that if they're as passionate as they don't want to say no. They want to get everyone in. I'm always constantly like self-care, 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 because that I really worry about that. So we're really seeing some changes, and the kids, I think we're going to see this bubble of these kids it's going to be a very interesting in the future. So really working on it today is how do we support them, and how do we help ourselves to be able to support them. So we can go to the next one. Just some tidbits. I don't know if you guys know, but like in the workplace, and you think of all of our home stressors that are linked to mental illness, those are some of them in the 21st century that were rated the top concerns. You can go to the next one. So let's get into what is resiliency so that we can understand when we're applying. Now, there's a lot of different characteristics of resiliency. These are the characteristics that I find to be very important, okay, working with kids. And because there's a great book, there's a book in Kenneth Ginsburg, he writes a book, and it's in my references as well, about the 7 C's of resiliency. And so there's a lot of if I would have known that my 5 S's of self-esteem were tied to that, I could have wrote a book or something, right? But he beat me to it, and it's a really great book, so please look it up and get that if you're wanting more on how you can help your kids, because some of that I pull. So what is resiliency? If we're looking at resiliency and what that means, it would be that obviously it's the ability to adapt and recover from personal and professional setbacks. And that's not trauma. Like everyone wants to catastrophize like that's someone who's struggling with trauma. My trauma is different than yours. My trauma was my divorce, right? Who would think that's a trauma? It was the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me. My brother dying, of course, was traumatic, but that was the most traumatic thing. Everyone has their own thing, and if you haven't, you're blessed, right? But even there's probably something, losing a job, right? Anything. We all have gone through something that. So when you have resiliency, it's not just this, it's a bunch of different things. But when we're looking at kids, it's the ability to be like, okay, that was really bad. I'm going to sit in this. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to feel icky. And then I'm going to come up with my options on how I'm going to work through it. And a child that's not resilient is forget it. I'm done. I'm not going back to school. I'm not going to that teacher, or lashing out. The other thing with resiliency, and again, I just want to make I am don't want anyone here to feel like I am this preaching, judgy person, because I don't have it figured out. Okay, my daughter could come up here and be like, she's a hot mess. Most days, okay? So this is a time for you guys to be vulnerable, and that's also something I think with resiliency. It's the vulnerability of being able to take accountability and really look at yourself and say, wow, my self-awareness part of, this isn't working for me. This isn't working for my relationships. This isn't working for this. And that's that. And that's a powerful thing to be accountable and do that. So please know that. And that is part of resiliency is that self-awareness. And a strong sense of self. When I say a strong sense of self, it is it's even deeper than I'm a sister, I'm a volleyball player, I'm this, I'm that. It's the other side. I'm a kind person. I'm loyal. I believe in God. I love my family. My family comes first. I'm a good friend. There's all those things. I'm connected to my community, right? I give back. There's lots of different things in the sense of self. Give you an example of not a good sense of self. We see a lot of kids. I see a lot of sports related for kids. And our journey to resiliency, I talk about this. And I am not against select sports. Actually, I'm working with Pewaukee Sussex United because they're working on a player-first program that integrates this. But there are a lot around here, too. That was very shocking to me when I moved to Oconomowoc, and it's even grown now, about all the select sports. And you're either in or you're out. And I remember my son was one, I have athletic kids, but I remember my son he just didn't find a sport. And you know, when you're 9, are you supposed to know? And is your agility and your sport, like, are you supposed to be, you know, LeBron James or, you know, or whatever. I can't remember who my son's coach used to say, like, you look like you're hitting like him, but you're not even hitting the ball. But I remember my son tried out for it. He was recruited to do something in a select team because they didn't have enough players, and he ended up loving it. And then he had a tryout, and there was more kids, and he didn't make it. And the saddest part for me was, as being an adult, was that you have 5 coaches who are all the parents of all these other players that made the team and are the coaches, right? Which is fine, right? They make that commitment. Is how come not one of those people, women and men, would come up and say, hey, you know what, Caleb? Either be honest with them, because that's the reality. It's called radical acceptance, but in a loving way of, like, you know what, I think you need to practice more. Because guess what? He didn't practice at all. He thought he was, you know, Ryan, who is it? Ryan, whatever. Right? I just know Molitor and all those guys, right? And so he'd be like, well, you know, you need to just practice. I want to hear that you've out on the field every day throwing the ball with your dad and that you're practicing at the batting cages. And if you do that, you come back, you have a really good shot. Not one of those men or women said anything. He was like, off. And guess what? You're no longer in the group. And so are the parents. Like, I'm no longer in the group. I'm like, wait a minute, I just spent like 2 seasons with you guys hanging out. And they're like, because it's kind of your creature of your environment. They're busy now, right? My son was 9, threw his bag down, said, I'll never play baseball again. And I said, that should never be any of our children, because you're 9. Like, what he looks like now from when he was 9, and that's really something to teach these kids, is your brain is developing, hormones, everything is growing, your body's gonna change. Fortunately, he found his gift, right? We pushed him, which it's okay to push and say, we want you to try something. You have to try something. And this would be advice, a little sidebar advice. When I see kids that don't have anything going on, like, what do? I watch TV. What else do you do? I watch TikToks. You know, what else? I Snapchat with my friends. Like, I've watched the whole series of Stranger Things and this and this. That worries me. And I feel like it's not like the idle hands, like they're gonna get in trouble, but there is a lot more time free for them to be doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. And believe me, with social media right now and what I'm seeing and the things, the more you could get them off their phone and engaged in something else is resiliency, and also helps them with their social skills and social emotional learning, right? And so even more so, because I know I'm guilty of it, when the shutdown happened, you know, I'm trying to keep my business afloat. There's lots of stories. That's a whole, like, other talk about that I moved my parents here and then the shutdown happened and they had to live with us, right? And all 4 kids. And we had just moved the week before into a smaller house, right? I'm serious, right? So I am, you know, yes, use the phone, go do something, right? But it's not that anymore. So this is the time to say it worked for then and it served its purpose and now we don't need it now, right? And so now they're saying, so I encourage you to have your kids a team event. It doesn't need to be a sport, a team activity, an individual activity, and to make them follow through with what they start. Remember, were your parents like that? Like, if I tried something, you just had to finish it. Now my son's, but I don't want to do it anymore, I'm not going. No, you're finishing it, right? So my son found his gift. He was a theater kid, so he was very involved in the Oconomowoc Theater. He prided on himself that he was the nerd in the nerd when he was a sophomore. So, and then the shutdown happened his senior year when he was a lead, never went to prom, right? Madison, he's in Madison, not very fun in Madison right now, right? Locked twice up, right? So, you know, that strong sense of self comes with failure. We want to go in, and I don't want to say that we're like we're like the parents that are like swoop in, but we're kind of bulldozer. I'll fix it. I'll do it. And maybe not all, but I know lots of parents that will move mountains, and that's so great, but then we have to think, what are we doing and why are we doing that, right? Because sometimes disappointment is okay. My son not making the team, I don't like how it was handled, but we had good discussions after that. That opened dialogue, and it also made me say, wow, you really are struggling with that. If you're not part of this, you're not good. And then I'm good or I'm bad, right? I'm smart or I'm dumb. So here's the great thing about resiliency. Resiliency can be learned, right? So today you're like, well, you know, Dee just spoke and my kid's 15, might as well forget it, it's all done. No, you can do that now. And I'm going to tell you some things that you can do as a family to help that. So this isn't like good luck to y'all, right? I am learning as well. And so it is something that learns. So let's look at some further here while we move forward. Do you want the next slide? Is just some characteristics of some things that I think are tied to kids. So the ability to recognize and manage feelings. So that's that emotion regulation. I don't know about you guys if you see it, but I see with kids a lot. It's that up or down modes. It's, I almost say it's like the Willy Wonka and the chocolate factory, the girl that's like, I want it and I want it now. It's not just that. Those are really extreme, but it really is just someone that doesn't know how to manage their emotions. And it comes from different things. And I don't know how you guys were raised, but I see a lot of people that and adults, that they weren't told, that their parents didn't tell them that they loved them, or they didn't help them through things. Or, I know my parents wasn't like, how was your night? Tell me about your friends. Like me, I'm in my kids like, what's going on? Tell me who you're with. I like that to a certain extent, right? But our parents, I don't know about anyone else's parents, but my parents were not as involved in our lives, right? And so how we manage our feelings and show emotions, we have learned as we have gotten older, right? So there's a really great book on that called, it's about transference. It's called When the Past is Present, and it just talks a lot about how those messages, maybe said and unsaid, kind of flow to us and then that. So it's so great that you guys are here and wanting to learn different because, again, my parents didn't have these resources. It was a secret that still they struggle with. My cousin died of a heart attack. That's what everyone said. No, he didn't. He died in a hotel room from an overdose. And until we can look at that and say that you're not going to judge me for that and that my parents are going to be judged, but see, we still have that stigma of it. When my brother died, I can understand. My brother died in 2012. This was before Augie, and Sofa and all that. So, yeah, it kind of was like that. People who used heroin were people on the street. My brother wasn't that. Right? He probably looked a little scary, so he had tattoos, he was a musician, but he wasn't that. Otherwise, he was a very savvy, nice dresser for a drug addict. So you have a sense of independence and self-worth, right? So there's that self-worth. I value myself, which means that I'm going to have good limits and boundaries, which is so appropriate with kids today, with the boundaries with phones, right? Can form and maintain positive, mutually respectful relationships with others. I don't know if you guys have girls, but I'm telling you, the cattywampus that I experience, not just in my office chair, but at home, is so crazy. And it's different because I have my husband, my bonus daughter, Ryan, is 24, right? So phones had just come. I remember when we gave her a flip phone and we were really strict with it. She had a flip phone and everything, and we had it all good plugged in and everything. But her experiences, even that much from where my daughter's 16, that difference, and even in between when my son 3 years younger, right? There's so much of a difference in how they use those phones and how they talk to their friends. It's it's probably one of the things that I'm on my daughter all the time. What did you just say? You don't talk like that, right? We don't talk like that. And so with kids, maintaining positive relationships, right? There seems to be this really change in relationships with girls now. There isn't a lot of loyalty, and it's whatever the mainstay goes, right? It's whatever it is, and it can be, I hate you, go die in a hole, which I have heard people say to and seen text, I deal with kids, teenagers, go die in a hole, you should just kill yourself. To the next day, all of a sudden, I'm fine, it's good, I made up, they're all good. I'm like, wait a minute, so tell us how then that changes the brain chemistry of our kids, of thinking that that's how we talk to people, right? Imagine you saying that to your friend, right? And then your husband, your coworkers, because this is all getting normalized that it's all fine now. No, that's not fine. And that's a great thing to talk to your kids about and teaching them resiliency is that you deserve positive, healthy relationships. And let's talk about what that looks like. And there's so many resources that you has the line like toxic, positive. Let's go through and see who. And then let's see, I'm not saying shaming and making anyone bad, but how can you as kids be leaders and to the girl to help that other person saying, hey, Susie, that wasn't really nice to me. And if you want to continue to be a friend with me, you can't say that. My daughter would be like, please. But that's what I would, right? Be able to solve problems and make informed decisions and have a sense of purpose and goals for the future. And that doesn't have to be like being a freshman and needing to know what you're going to go to college for, right? Because I think that sets kids up too. I think it's okay for a gap year. I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me. You can go to the next slide. I think it's the best thing that ever happened to me was to take a break and really figure it out, right? And to know that that's what I wanted to do. And my son always says, I'm going to business school, I'm going to business school, I'm gonna do this, I want politics, da-da-da. And I'm like, maybe you should just go freshman year and be a freshman and just enjoy yourself, you know, in Madison the best you can under the circumstances and adjust. And then guess what, you might change. Well, sure enough, my son is, but now he has that like questioning, and he calls me because I'm the soft one, and be like, you know what, you're learning, your brain is still developing, you're gonna change, you can do whatever you like to do, you know, within a reason of what we're paying for, right? So anyway, so the number one thing that I want to talk about with building resiliency and the importance is role modeling, right? And that's probably what we're going to talk about a lot is the role modeling. So it's one of my favorite things is it's not only children who grow, parents do too, as much as we watch to see what our children do with their lives, they are watching us to see what we do with ours. I can't tell my child to reach for the sun. All I can do is reach for it myself. And so for your group too, this is something that really I feel like during the pandemic, I had to really look at myself, and it helped me reflect to say, I think I'm doing too much. And my husband is home, he was deployed, he came home and all this stuff happened. And he's like, wow, this is a different home. Your business has grown threefold. You're working every night. Like, how long is this? You know, we thought pandemic will be fine, but it still seems that. So I also want to teach my kids, like my daughter, like I want to spend time with her, is that owning a business doesn't mean that it owns you or that all this. I want them to be happy, and how I cope with my stress is really important, and how you cope with your stress too. So tonight we're going to talk a lot about role modeling, because that's the number one thing, that power that we have with our kids when they're around us, especially when you have your littles. We can go to the next one. So we're going to talk about some of these different topics, building resiliency. So, I don't know why I'm looking up there when I have it right here. Okay. So self-awareness, like I said, I think it's important for us, and this with the questions I have for you guys tonight, is really looking at where do you feel that your strengths are, and where you feel like you can really look and say, you know, through this last year or 2 years, or where I am today, what can I really look at and say, where is there a part of myself that I feel that I could grow further in my journey, right? Or where is there, and I hate to say like weaknesses or faults or not, where have I maybe went the wrong way and went off of maybe some unhealthy coping or unhealthy patterns that I'm taking from the past and bringing them into the present, whether it's with messages or how we handle with our kids, with discipline, whatever it is, right? To really look at that and say, what can I be doing different? And then the next one is just the communication. And then empathy. Number one thing I really feel like that we're missing is empathy. It's really hard to get kids in all of our programs, and we do a lot of different activities in there to try to get them to walk in someone else's shoes and to understand that everyone is different, right? If we were all the same, that'd be extremely boring. But kids have a hard time with that, and the empathy is really, really hard right now, because we are in this like self-absorbed, it's about me. And, you know, I understand that there's a lot of circumstance to that, but that teenager, it is already in their brain, it's about them. And so teaching them empathy, and there's ways you can do that. And then just connections, who you have in your kid's life. Like I said with the coaches with my son Caleb, I also remember I've witnessed coaches screaming, yelling, swearing. I've seen parents doing that, right? And I know we all have our stuff where sometimes that comes out, or we see something that's not appropriate, but the leaders of those organizations and the people who are in them, our kids look up to them. And so I always just think, make sure you know who your kids are around, and who are their mentors, and who do they look up to. Do any of you know who your kids, like who they look up to, who they think is awesome, the bomb? Do they tell you who is it these days? It's Aubrey? Yeah. Aubrey's the bomb? They love her? That's a big, wow. What do? Do you have a TikTok or something that we should see? Okay, so you know, that's so great, because I just turned 50, and I had my birthday party, and one of my friends that I've had forever brought a card from her daughter, Audrey. And I've known her since she was born, and, life gets busy. We were in there a lot. My daughter and her would play American Girl dolls. Now there's like ones in high school and this. So I've spent a lot of time, and I am kind of like an aunt figure to her. But the last couple years, I haven't really been around. But she wrote me the sweetest card about, and I was like, oh my God, I made a difference. Not that I don't think I do every day, but when you have someone that's so close to you, I'm like, that's awesome. That's the best gift I got. So. Yeah, that's the best. So that's quite a thing. And you want to be able to, that's so awesome to be able to say that you make a difference, that someone looks up to you. So imagine if you're screaming and yelling, I'm telling them, like, you are not good at that, right? Imagine our teachers. That's what I worry about. They're so burnt out. My first trauma was my first grade teacher that she was really sweet. She was really sweet, but she was really angry one day, and she called me dumb. And I remember that. Right? And my daughter Ryan remembers a teacher also telling her, like, oh, you're a girl, you don't get math, or something like that, right? Like, it's just that it's not meant to be mean, but it's just like a side. And so you have to think about sometimes, so one thing about trauma, when I treat trauma, severe trauma that really is ingrained, that sticks with people, is before the age of 12. And if you talk to people and you see and you have them float back, where have you felt that before? Float back, where have you felt that before? Now peel the onion again. Oh, it was like maybe first grade. Someone told me I was not athletic and I couldn't do it. And so then over that, I just built that foundation of not resiliency, but I was resistant to really look at myself and say, I can do it. And no one was there because it was a message, or, I didn't get picked on the team, so that just reinforced it, right? So there's these messages that our kids have. So my number one thing here's to save thousands of dollars of therapy, okay? What I would tell you is, and your kids, is what's your self-care, and that's for you guys too. What's your self-care? Like, you are role modeling self-care. That's what you need. Sleep, eat, exercise. And most kids come in and they're on their phones. Their phones are with them in their rooms. Get it? I'm guilty of it too. But that phone continues to ring and it activates the brain, which we'll talk about later. But if we're not eating, sleeping, and exercising, or taking care of ourselves, or having some sort of sense of outlet for ourselves, like this for you guys, it really affects your core and affects your mental health, and not just your physical, but your emotional. So self-care, which then I also then say you role model it, and that's what your kids. So sleep. Kids, teenagers with their brains developing, they need a lot of sleep. They need to sleep, they need to eat, and they need to have some sort of physical activity. The next thing, too, is our own self-regulation. What I noticed, and I give the example of my daughter, is that when my daughter, who has anxiety and ADD, I would catch myself, because again, it's harder for me. A lot of people pay me to see their kids, but my daughter doesn't take my advice, so I pay a therapist more money than what I charge to see, right? But she listens to her for the same thing. But I will see that I will recognize that my daughter will be anxious, and her anxiety, because anxiety in kids is it comes off as that irritability, right? That angsty, you think it's angsty teenager, you're just it could be if it's consistent. So she gets anxious, it's about control, right? Anxiety is about control, safety, and responsibility. Hers is about needing to be in control. And she goes up, and then I go up a level. And then she goes up, and I go, there's my storm, right? I have to learn what my triggers are and not engage. And that's taken a lot, but that's practice. And that's my self-awareness of, like, this isn't working, because she goes down the luge, right? And then I'm trying to reel in off the slide her reactions and her emotions, and then it's already too late, right? So I have to be recognized, so recognizing what your triggers are, and if it's something that for sure it's your hard trigger and you don't have a solution on how to deal with it yet, that's when you do one of those tap out and you have your partner or someone else step in. Because what you're doing is you're implanting a negative coping skill, right? So you're teaching them, because eventually if you get this high, you're like, forget it, I'm done, do whatever, or whatever it is, right? They learn either this is how I get my way, or this is how I get mom to shut down, this is how I push buttons. And so you're training this little brain. It's not that they're sassy, it's not the kids. It's like the dog that I have that I've ruined. We went to training, and I sat there. I felt like it was a marriage session, a counseling session. I feel like someone's going to take my license away, and it was a love and logic, right? And it was seriously like training us. It's not training the dog. So, it's very interesting. So I think that, like, you have to think of it that way. You are training your kids how to react to certain situations. And again, this is something you can change, because you can say, like, hey, time out. Like, we do these family plans with families where we can be like, you know what, this isn't working, and this is why it's not working, and we want everyone to be happy, and here's the deal, here's the openness and accountability. We were raised a certain way, Dad and I, or if you're alone or whatever, and I took the best I could of what was good, and, we don't get a manual, right? Our parents did that to us too, and so we're trying to work that together and mesh that together, and sometimes we're not gonna have it figured out. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of like clear it, and we're gonna restart. And we're gonna come up with a family mission statement, and then we're gonna come up with, and we do family plans. I can help any of you or send you that if you need that. But, and then you just own it. Yeah, I totally lost my crap. You're right, I'm sorry. But I'm gonna work on that. You know why? Because I notice that when you're upset, I get upset because you're upset, and I don't want you to be upset. And so your control, my control, your control. So being aware of your triggers and being very mindful and grounded in that. Like, I now can kind of read the room and see how my daughter's doing and know which way to how to go in, right? Every kid is different. Don't you think? Every kid is different. How I talk to my son and how he deals with stuff is very different than how my daughter does. And the other thing is change the mindset. That is just being, if you tend to be more on the negative side or on the same thing of the spectrum of like, this isn't gonna work out, or that we're not gonna be able to do that, or that's not gonna work, is either keep that to yourself, but maybe change the mindset. Like, hey, you know what, we're gonna give it a try. Because guess what you're teaching your kids? We're gonna give it a try. And it might not work out, it might be funny, right? Like that trip that you planned that just falls to pieces. I've had several of those blending families. And instead, my husband would be like, we're never doing this again. I'm like, no, we're gonna do this again. It's gonna be torture, but we need to do this, because if we just say, yeah, it was a horrible last 4 family vacations together with all of our kids, and we don't do it again, right, then we're not helping them get through it, right? So we keep going, and you ends up working through. And then teaching your kids, and I don't think that we do this enough, and I don't think our kids do, and I have my clients do this, is just practicing gratitude. When we have all day of all the stuff that has gone on in your day, I always trying to end on the note of like, but what am I grateful for? Like, we're so blessed, and there's lots of things that we can be grateful for, right? Even when we are at our worst or really icky things are happening, that there is somewhere in there that we can find to be grateful. And this helps with those kids who are those all or nothing, black and white, it's this or that. That helps with them, because then you kind of give that edge in. It's like, it's not black or white. There is a gray of like, but look at this. You were able to do that. That today wasn't the way you wanted it to turn out, but look at all the other things. And I try to say that at the end of the day. And I know that I have read lots of books and done lots of research on when's the best time to talk to your kids. And I found out it's the time I used to do it, that's you shouldn't do. And then it's when you pick them up from school and you're like, how are you? And I used to be like that, how are you? How was your day? Did you sit with someone from lunch? Who did you sit with? What did they say? What's going on? And my son would be like, oh my God, right? They said, don't do that. And so I tried something different, right? Because that wasn't working. And I read this book. I'm like, I've been doing it wrong. I go in at the end of night, and all of a sudden my 15-year-old boys like come cuddle with me, and then we just talk, right? And my daughter is not bedtime, because that's her time that she is just going down, settling down. Hers is, she likes to do it when she's eating, we sit or whatever, she'll just come in and hang out. She likes that a different time. So you gotta find, like, when's the best time? Because otherwise they'll just be like, leave me alone. I don't wanna talk to you. Why are you bugging me? Why all the questions? Or they're gonna shut you down, and then you just feel like, okay, there's that, great day, nice talking to you, You have to say, I can understand that maybe this isn't the best time for you, but I want to make sure that we are transparent and communicating with each other, okay? I know your friends are super important to you right now. You're in that phase of your life, like if you're a teenager. But I really feel like we need to touch base a little bit just to have a pulse on everything and how you're doing. This is a tough time, right? So if we can do those things, that's thousands of dollars for you, right? Because believe it or not, the first thing I do with kids is when we do assessments is, you can put the next slide on. I do assessments and I ask how much digital time, how much devices, and sleep and eat. And I'm like, I mean, it's funny, chuckle, because we've all been there, right? But add like this phone thing, right? We didn't have that. I chuckle, I'm like, wow, you're on the phone for 12 hours, plus you're on a device and this and then. I'm like, wow, okay, so you have severe anxiety, can't look at people in the eyes, you can't walk down the hallway unless you look at the phone, you feel like you're missing out, you're defined by a like, if someone likes your Facebook or your Instagram or your TikTok or whatever it is, that's a concern. And so I do a cleanse where they have to they have to limit and slowly expose themselves to decreasing that device time. I mean, there is now facilities, and there'll be more, that actually have that. So I used to organize in schools the screenagers, if any of you have seen them. So I used to bring them to schools and then have a panel, but that was really eye-opening, and it's even more so now. They just came out with another show called Angst. But there's now facilities that are all about device and gaming. So it is now even more so a concern for our society with addiction. So finding that balance, right? I used to have pictures of my kids on phones, but I thought that's probably bad karma. But so finding that balance, if you guys are one of those parents, which I've called myself out on it, that's on a phone all the time, that you're always there and plugged in, you're basically role modeling to your kids that's where your attention is in that. So that's the other thing of just being really mindful of knowing your device time and finding that balance. I always encourage people that there's certain times it's a no phone go, like out to dinner. I know that it's really fun to give your kid a game to play so you can have a meal, but please don't do that anymore. I know, bring a puzzle, a coloring book, a sticker pad. How about we all play tic-tac-toe? How about we all this is a time to engage. So, I'm sorry, I've done it too, but reality is, and the radical acceptance is that we are creating this culture for our kids that it's acceptable to be disrespectful in every setting, and we need to make that change. So no phones. We're going out, we're spending our money to take you out to dinner. That should be, something that is held as a family great ritual. That's the thing too. Our families don't have rituals anymore or things that they do anymore. And so finding that balance and not having that no phone at the dinner table, shut down, phones put away. But guess what? It's not just for the kids. You have to practice what you preach. And so you have to know when to unplug. So I am on this exposure therapy for myself that I'm trying to be done with work unless I have a speaking event at a certain time. And then after that, I am family time in my house and doing the things I like to do. I took up puzzling. I know I don't look like a puzzler, but I love them. It's very addicting. I also paint by numbers. That's something I picked up. I also love my new house, the gardening. All things I don't know what I'm doing, but it's been a great adventure. And we got a dog, right? So, but finding that balance, and I know I was out of balance, so then I'm role modeling. I'm on my computer, I'm doing this, watching the TV and this and that, no more. So that's, again, that awareness and owning it and saying, like, when am I going to make this change? When is our family going to make this change and do that? Because that's going to help you. Kids need that. That's what we're seeing. How are kids that are in high school now that have gone through this pandemic or going off to college going to find balance? It's really hard. Statistics of dropouts they're not talking about it, but increased, right? It's going to be very interesting what happens with this group of kids that have gone off to college in the post and pandemic. So trying to find that balance. Next one. So that other part of learning to adapt and deal with change and setbacks. So again, I had mentioned about talking with your kids and that radical acceptance of, like, you're not always going to win, right? Which is very different than I think some that we hear, which is, don't worry, we'll try this, I'll talk to this person, don't worry, you can do this, instead of just letting your kids sit in the ick. When we were younger, we sat in the ick, right? I did okay, right? I always say to my students, I'm like, C's get degrees, right? Like, but that's probably not a good one for me, right? But it's all in the pressure part, right? Like, all these kids have so much pressure with select sports and AP and IB and all this stuff, and that's what accelerates that pressure for them to go to college and have to have it all figured out. Like, my son is already a sophomore, even though he's a freshman. And I said, you're fine, you have plenty of time. Figure it out if that's something you do. That's why you work so hard in high school. I mean, don't fail, flunk, or whatever, but this is the time to explore who you are as a person. And again, your brain's not fully developed until we're 26 years old or so. For some, probably longer, right? Right? And so with your kids, how to deal with change and adapt to recover from setbacks is having that communication and empathy, teaching them empathy, like, I'm really sorry that I know. How does that feel for you that that happened, that you didn't make that team or that musical? How does that feel? Some kids want to go right away and deflect and project it elsewhere. And where do they get that from? Probably us. So they might want to go, well, it's because so-and-so, or their mom's this, or the teacher hates me, and that's why, right? And I always try, let's bring it back to you. That may be some of the fine things there, but let's look at your part, and let's just look at, why can't you just feel icky and disappointed? And then let's talk about how you're gonna handle that in a healthy way. And then what else, then we'll talk about what you can try next, right? We can try something else. But we aren't always going to get what we want. We all know that, and I think that that's really hard for kids today because that goes in that bucket of all or nothing. So when I work with kids about changes and setbacks, what happens is these kids are all like, everyone hates me. Everyone hates, right? Everyone hates me. I'm horrible. I'll never do this. I'm the worst on the team. I'm all of this. And what I do is I have them do this activity, and you can do this with your kids. It's called like D's baskets or bubbles theory. And what it is I help them separate all of the different components of their life that make them and contribute to them. What are your hobbies? You have your family, you have your hobbies, you have your really close friends, you have your church group, you're in Girl Scouts, right? We do this thing in one of our workshops where we start with, this is you, but how do you get to be you? Who are all those people in your life that makes you you? And the bubble is like a huge flower when you can think of all the people that help and contribute to each child, grandparents, extended families, all of that, right? And so it's important that we teach them those components. The one thing I was going to say about the sports thing that I was going to say, so when we talk about a sense of self and setbacks like this, so I see a lot of kids that soccer mostly, I will say, soccer, concussions, or football, or boys lacrosse, holy cow. After so many, you can't play anymore. So if your kid is that superstar soccer kid, okay, and you might get mad at me, and that's okay, I'm gonna save you a lot of hassle. If you are pushing your kid to be the best in this one sport, you're doing it wrong, okay? You gotta be a soccer player, you're gonna be the best, you're gonna get a scholarship, you're gonna get that, that's awesome, right? But then they get a concussion, they get another concussion, and they get another concussion. Now we have trauma, because it affects them just like you would with someone who has trauma. Irritable, right? Memory, poor concentration, that irritability, anxiety, increase of anxiety, right? It messes with your brain. The brain's not developed and where that happens. Of course that's happening with us. I used to be a roller skater, and I probably fell on my head many times. I'm still alive, but I'm sure that plays a role a little bit of that I couldn't, maybe what could have I been? But anyways, these kids come in, these teenagers come in, and one girl I remember in particular had gotten a scholarship, full ride and everything, senior year, really hit hard, hurt her leg, and then also got like the 4th concussion. Guess what? You're done. Her whole sense of self and identity was, I'm a soccer player. I'm going to school, I'm on this is what I'm gonna do. And I'm not saying that's not a good thing to have that great sport, but where's the rest? So we then have a child or a teenager who is now so depressed and suicidal because what's my purpose, right? This is all I was good at. No, you're not. You just never tapped into all of that. So I think this is the time with our kids developing brains and the time that we it will make the setbacks better too, right? It will make it a little easier. Like, guess what? This is the time that we try things out. I mean, I know it's younger. I remember in high school, that's when you played sports, not when you were like, you had to be like the best at 3. But I don't subscribe to that, and I just say, like, try what you like, and then if you like it, then we can pursue, right? Then it'll be great. It's not gonna be the all or nothing. So that's a big thing. So spread out, right? It's very good for them. Trying to think of anything else on that one. All right, the next one. So that's my daughter Lydia when she was 9 on the Pacific Coast Highway. My son stayed in the car. That's when we found out he had a fear of heights. Confidence is rooted in competence. This is one of the quotes from Kenneth Ginsburg from his book. I believe that just makes so much sense, right? That when we're competent about something, right, is when we're more confident. So when we're learning and we have a good grasp of something, it builds that. So that's the things that we could be building in our kids too. Like, wow, you're so good. Like the positive reinforcement. You did really good on that. That looks really great. That boosts them up. Because right now they don't get that from each other. There is not a lot of that. I used to, whenever I see my friends, well, you look so pretty and stuff, but there's some weird thing about girls. They just won't, like, Mom, you don't do that. That's weird. Why wouldn't you tell your friends you like your sweater? Like, that just seems weird, right? There's this fear to be vulnerable, okay? So that's just one of my key quotes. So one of the other things about resiliency that I think is really important that I feel is we are struggling as a society. Obviously, with the shutdown, it plays a role, but I feel that our families that I see don't have a lot of connections with community and how they can be a part of the community, right? And so, and having empathy and compassion within and outside of a family. I want to say we're all very privileged and very lucky women that we live in where we live. And I don't think some of our kids have ever maybe been out of this area and they don't see that there are people that are really suffering. And I'm not saying you need to take them on the North Avenue and, down on the East Side and drop them off. I'm just saying, like, I think we need to do a better job of instilling in them being grateful and also helping others out. So I challenge everyone, and with our families, with the family plan, this is a great way to also do something with your family and have that positive time, is that you engage in something together. So whether that be family-friendly walks that, or like the events that like people have, volunteering together, the backpacks, blessings in a backpack, always looking for help. There's gonna be in the summer, lots of kids that are not having food, that don't have food. And so to help with that, where can they help with that? Or volunteering anywhere. There's lots of people volunteering for a friend who needs a babysitter that you just want to help out. We don't need to have our kids doing something to get something. And I grew up and I believe that we've lost that of like, you help your neighbor. It's not because I'm going to pay you $10 to do it. Not all kids are like that. I know lots of kids that my neighbors would be like, no, Miss D, that I'd be like, no, because you said that, even more so, no, take it. But we need to teach that, and I really feel like the patients and the families that I've seen over the last 25 years is like when we set up a plan about something that they're doing together, like balancing time with making one night that's like a game night or a new experience, everyone putting something in a bowl, like something they'd like to try, and everyone trying it. Like, this is a perfect time with the pandemic and with the time. So you have everyone put in all the ideas of something they've always wanted to try within reason. And obviously cost related, right? Maybe it's like, where would you want to visit? Like, what do you want to do outside? What's one activity you want to do outside with all of us? Play baseball, do something like that. Like, do an activity with them, or something that you're passionate about that you can volunteer. If you have a family member that has heart issues, you can do something with the Heart Association. You can do lots of different things. And so it's almost like a different way than, like, I know our kids are like in Girl Scouts and cookies and badges, but that's not really a community thing except going on our butts, right? All those cookies we eat. But it is, I mean, it gives them a goal, but how many of us really, I know sold them to all of our friends and family, right? I only would buy them, and that's probably was my fault, is that I only bought cookies from people who actually, the kids came to me and actually asked me. Not when the moms made the video or did something. It was just someone coming to me like old school. Come to my door and ask me, right? So that's just something like that we do with our family plans that you can do with your mission statement on there is like, what are 3 sentences that when your kids leave your house, how do you want them to describe their experience? And it's very powerful for many people to come up with that because it's very different and different. So it's, we will live in a home that's with respect for ourselves and others, following, loving, whatever it is, our faith, whatever it is, and then creating, where are the things that in a family that we struggle the most? Is it, the fighting amongst kids? Is it, not listening the first time? Is it the devices and the managing all that? And then, put together a plan. But the mission statement is important, because if you're creating a mission statement and then you share it with your kids, you are always living by that mission statement, right? Are you following our mission statement right now? Are you giving me the respect that I am giving to you and that we give to other people? See, that's how you ingrain those values and morals. So, okay, next one. Okay, so the other thing is the early intervention. How one handles success or failure is determined by their early childhood. So that, right, that must be what I said, and that's it, right? But I also feel like early intervention is the key. And that with my backstory of why I do what I do, is what I see is that that's not where we're at. And now we're in an epidemic. Now I have 65 people on my wait list. Now other places, you think that's bad. You can't see a doctor or a therapist in Aurora or Pro Health for months. And so now we're in a situation where people really need help. And, it's really, that's why now is the time. Right, not waiting, and I think that's our denial, because what does that say about us as moms? If we have to go get help for our kid, what do most parents say, and I have to confront this, is, I did something wrong. You're telling me I'm doing something wrong. Now, it's not me saying that, because I would never say that to anyone, because I would tell them my story that I don't have it together, that I get it. But that is the biggest roadblock, is our egos, right? And if we can remove that part and put it over here, because that's not helping your kids or you. And so friends, family you talk to, you have a red flag, why wouldn't you go the first red flag if there's something? If your kid's saying, like, I really hate my life. I really don't know why I'm here. I wish I was gone. Because the next is going to go the next. It's going to go the next. And that's why we're seeing such an increase in kids self-harming, eating disorders, substances, and putting themselves in really bad situations. Like, right now, social media and everything, a whole nother talk with social media and the perpetrating with trafficking. It's very, very scary times right now. So, okay, next. So I love Mr. Rogers, isn't it? So I love this one. The most important learning is the ability to accept and expect mistakes and deal with the disappointments that they bring, right? Isn't that totally... I think we didn't realize how wise he was when we used to watch him, right? I never really got into the whole, train thing, little the puppet thing, but I don't know if anybody's read the book that they have all of Fred Rogers' quotes. They're amazing and powerful. He was ahead of his time in lots of areas with some of the issues that we are dealing with today. And so I found that, and I thought that was really great. So let me ask you guys, with all of that I just, what is something else that you have a question about or that you struggle with that you feel like, how would I apply a resiliency building to that? Is there anything in specific that I haven't touched on that you want to know about? Yeah, so what does that look like?
Well, for example, she used to love taking baths, and now, the sound of the water as the bathtub is filling up kind of freaks her out.
Did anything happen where maybe she fell or slipped in the bathtub, didn't tell you?
It could have been, and she didn't tell me.
Okay.
I usually watch them.
Yeah. Anything ever with a hose or with anything else? No? She just decided, I don't like baths? Usually it's like a 14-year-old boy, right? You know what so I would just see how, if it starts to manifest in some other ways, right? Do you know some kids have those sensory things, and that doesn't mean that they have a sensory learning issue, right? I'm not saying a red flag, I remember my kids a lot of kids don't like the stuff on their toes, right? Or tags on the back. It doesn't mean that they're Asperger's or that they have all this stuff. It's just sometimes some kids don't like that stuff. And so you have to kind of wait to see how that is. Does she freak out though? Like, doesn't want to do it at all?
She did in the beginning, and now she's getting a little bit better. So
Okay.
I don't know if it was just a small fear.
So if it was anxiety, she would be screaming and freaking. So you exposed her through that, and it's fine. Now you could maybe ask her, like, hey, sweetie, remember the other time you like didn't like see, that's the other thing too, that sometimes we like, avoidance is bliss, like, just don't talk about it, right? No, talk about it. Why wouldn't she, like, let's ask. You're 4, she can say, like, hey, you didn't like the before when the water was running, was that scare you? Was it hot one time or something? And just see what she says. It could have been that it was running, maybe she put her hand, you didn't see it, it was hot, or she didn't like that feeling. She might be able to identify that, but if it would start into other things, like if you turned on the water in the sink, if she had to brush her teeth. Now I don't want water, right? That's quite extreme, but that's what would happen. So I think here's some red flags that if you're thinking about is, does my kid have anxiety, right? Because one thing that we do know about anxiety that I tell with patients and families is, here's the good news, bad news. Bad news is you have anxiety, okay? But here's the good news. If there was one issue to have, a mental health issue or emotional issue, it's probably you want anxiety, because anxiety is something that you can resolve over time. Now, does that mean it's gonna take me, like I will be super chill all the time? No, I'm a high-strung person. I'm always gonna have that, but I am not gonna be completely imprisoned and debilitated by my anxiety, where I can't leave, where I have panic attacks, where, you know what I mean? So it grows over time. And so if you don't get help, it gets worse. So we want to always reach it here when it's just some of the things like, oh, they just don't want to go here, they don't like touching that, or they don't like that. And again, anxiety looks different in kids differently, because anxiety looks like an irritable kid, maybe poor concentration, not lack of focus, maybe some like explosive stuff here or there, needing things certain ways. They start to talk a little bit like that all or nothing. So then there's the verbal part. So those are the physical, but the verbal would be like, I can't do that. Nope, really rigid, black or white. That would be something that you would want to say, like, let's explore that, and I just push a little bit and see what happens. Now you see the interesting thing though, and I do this with teachers in some of the schools, is it ADHD? Because guess what, some of that is ADD characteristics too, or is it anxiety? And so the difference is, or is it this angst, right? And that is how you engage with the student. So if the kid goes up and is sharpening the pencil and keeps sharpening, and the teacher's like, Johnny, sit down, what are you doing? That's your 5th time you've been at the pencil sharpener, right? There's that shame, right? There's the shame, because I don't know why I have to do it, but for some reason I have to have my pencil this certain way, otherwise I can't do my work, right? Or maybe it's the tapping. But again, if someone's tapping or whatever, anxiety can trigger that. That's anxiety, like, God, I can't focus, right? That's ADD too. So you have to fine tune, right? And the thing with anxiety is when it really starts to affect functioning in your life is when you know it's a problem, right? Now with kids, I wouldn't wait for that, because we as adults have some sort of a template to know when it's bad. They don't, because they're learning, so they are normalizing the abnormal all the way. Even we do. So, but them, they're like, well, maybe this is how it's supposed to be, right? Maybe this is why. That's why you see all these different things coming up. That is a whole other talk of their sexual identity. All of that, it's like, well, maybe I'm feeling this way. Well, the TikTok says that it's okay that I'm this and that and all that, right? All the exposure our kids have, right? It's a lot of pressure. And so that's why we have to have that open communication of what they're seeing, hearing, and doing, because they're going to have a lot of questions, right? So, not meaning to scare you all, right? Yeah. Did anyone else have teenagers? Teenagers? Little kids? Teenagers? Little, okay. Both, yeah. So you got right there, both, yeah. And there's the other thing too, right? When you have a teenager that's older and then you have a younger, right? How do you meet in the middle to be able to keep those that somewhat separated, right? Because they maybe have more access than the younger child, but you're gonna see, if you don't really stay firm with your values and morals and beliefs, that all of a sudden your kid, that's the younger one, is gonna get everything that the older one got way younger, and that's not a good, that's what a trap that I think everyone gets into, right? The push, push, push. And you know, if you have that mission statement, and you stand with what your values and where you're at, and look at your own resiliency and how you handle that, that's where you need to kind of stay and not budge on some of those things too. But, and you know what? The great thing is, you can go online, there's Big Life Journal, you can print out fun stuff for your kids now. You can Google and say, how do I know if my kid has anxiety? Or you can call Gals Institute and tell me what's going on, and I'll say, okay, yeah, come on in, you need a couple sessions, right? So, any other questions? Do you have another one? Yeah.
What about a tendency to be in control? 11, 12-year-old, or now going to be in their teens soon. So example, our puppy, she's been with us, it'll be 2 years in July. If a door is open, if somebody comes to the door, the fear is the dog's gonna run up the door, even though she's really good. And she grabs her and scoops her up, or if we're walking and a car is coming, she picks her up. And I ask, in a nice way, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid, kind of a.
Yeah, good question.
No, and she won't even go into it, but I can tell there's a fear there.
So again, anxiety, right? So anxiety is that responsibility, safety, control, right? So is she feeling that she has to be the responsible one, that something bad's gonna happen if I'm not taking care of it? So that's a great communication point okay, so there's this great activity of what I can control and can't control that we do. So you do the circle and you say what I can control, you just write it in there and you make it kind of fun, construction paper. And then you have another one of what you can't control, right? And then you say, the weather. What is it? And she picks, right? If she's 11, 12, you can actually draw it, so you can actually have like what I can control, and then what I can't outside. It's a great tool for 11 or 12-year-old because there's a lot. That's what we're friendships. Like I can't fix it, I can't control it, which means then I'm not good enough. And that's when it's that slippery slope for girls, right? Well, then what can I do that I can be good at? Or right, or how can I remove this feeling? And that's when it gets into I heard if you cut, that releases that feeling. Oh, I heard if you starve, that I can be in control of that. Because I can't control the dog, I can't control you, I can't control this, but I can control that. So for you to be opening up and recognizing that, which is really good, because that's a really subtle thing, is to say, I want us to just sit down and see and just talk about this. Like, what are some of the things that you feel like you need to, what you control and what you can't control? And you throw it out there, like a friend being mad at you. Can you control that or not? It's interesting to hear what they say. Yeah. Because they're like, yeah, I can, I got it, yeah, how? Can you really control another person's actions? Right. Then it opens a dialogue of like, not really. I mean, you could be the nicest person and someone could not be nice to you, yeah. Right? And then it opens other discussion. Why does that happen? And, again, don't go into mama bear, bulldozer, like, well, that Susie's never coming here again, right? It's really like you need to be like more of like, what you say here and what you're bridging and giving them an opportunity to be vulnerable and transparent with you. Yeah. And that's what you want. Because then when you say, hey, I want you to tell me, are there any other times or any other situations where, like, you need to pick up Fluffy because you're afraid when the door opens that they're going to run away and get hurt? I'm just naming it, right? And she goes, wow, that's really weird because at school, I have to be the first in line. Or I have to open the door. Or I have to be at this place because that's where I feel the safest. And it's bizarre because, and then some parents are like, how did I not know? Because if you open that Pandora's box, you might need to be prepared for what you hear. I'm not saying that's always the case. But sometimes it's like, then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, you go here when this happens or there, I didn't know that. And so then you kind of look at that and say, okay, well, let's look at how we can work through that. Because a lot of those things in the beginning, you can work through, you can do that. It's when it gets a little further where it's like, yeah, you need to call someone, right? Well, there's it's another dynamic, right? But it is an educational and communication. Like, it's interesting, Molly, when I see you do that, it makes me feel like when we're, when we go to the dog trainer, which I just had, and they tell you, like, if you give in and, you do this, they're never going to learn, and they're going to keep coming back and doing that, right, for the treat, right? So for you, you're teaching the dog that he or he can't, they need to be taken care of and moved, and you don't then feel good if you don't do that. Do you see how that's going to play that way? But I would ask, are there any other times that happens? And then I would just say, let's just do an experiment. Let's see. Now, please hope nothing bad happens, right, with the dog when it goes out. But mostly exposure therapy and CBT of what I specialize in is having them expose that and say, now, how do you feel in your body? Oh, that's really uncomfortable for me, right? When we're doing something for the first time and so, how does it feel now when we do it the second time? The goal is, guess what? It just went down. Okay, notice that. You just were able to do something that made you feel really uncomfortable, and now it's a little better. So there's that conversations that we're not having with our kids when they say, like, oh, I don't want to go in that party by myself. You're like, just get out of the car and go, right? To come back and say, how was that for you on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, oh my God, it was a 10. When did it go down? When did you notice that? Where did you feel it in your body? Right? Because a lot of kids that we see with anxiety, it's not so much of some of those things. Here's the other physical things: headaches, tummy aches, psychosomatic type of symptoms. We have kids that are going through rigorous tests with doctors, not a lot, because a lot of the doctors that we work with that refer to us have been so amazing with and knowing what's going on. But the doing tests on little kids, on kids because they have stomach aches and it's anxiety. And so recognizing that and saying, like, yeah, it affects your tummy, it affects your head. Sometimes you feel sweaty, sometimes you feel like you're like an elephant on your chest. Let's breathe through that. And so teaching them some breathing exercises and how they can control their breath and close their eyes. And again, apps on that. I mean, you won't need someone like me in the future, right? So, I mean, you just plug in your things and they'll tell you what to do in the app. So there's definitely tools and resources, and you have a great little opportunity to do that. Plus, you're building a relationship with your stepdaughter. Like my stepdaughter and I have a really great relationship because I'm kind of, because I'm not their mom, right? They tell me some things. So far, it's not been anything I don't want to hear, but you know what I mean? And I'm the soft landing, and I kind of say, well, let me think about that for a little bit. And that's the other thing, too. You guys, instead of saying no or us having to feel like we have to react and give an answer, it's okay to say, you know what? I don't know yet. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to pause on it, think about it, and I'll let you know. That's patience, teaching patience. That's resiliency, being able to be patient, right? And then also, of not feeling that pressure of joining them, of like, you need an immediate answer, right? I mean, remember when our parents said, no, because I said so? And that was just the end of the day, like you just done, right? I mean, I remember once I got grounded for every word that I said beyond that, right? I think I was senior, I was grounded. I think I was the only person in my school that had their own phone line, but I didn't know the phone number. Because I never could use it, I was always grounded from my phone. So I'd be the one with like the tape recorder thing, right, where you rewind it and be like, you're grounded from your phone again, because my mom could just unplug it and say, you're grounded from your phone. So the next slide is just what we talked about, just some of the things that we have coming up. If you're wanting that workshop box, if you have 4th through 7th grade, we're working on younger ones as well and getting into schools. If you have a school and they want to boost their social emotional learning, this is a really inexpensive curriculum, so please share with that because we want to give it to schools. And then our other, if you're a vendor or anything like that, if you've ever been to our Shopping for a Cause, it's super awesome and fun. And then the next is just, I wanted to tell you, and I can send this to you guys. I just put that in there because it was pretty. Yeah. I was like, I'm going to make that. It looks pretty. I was in that mood yesterday, that Zen mood. Like, okay, so that's cool. Next one. And so these are some of the references that I use. So the other thing, too, that are any of you Brene Brown fans? So Gifts of Imperfection is something I prescribe to people to read all the time. Her TED Talk. So I met Brene Brown. She spoke at a conference early on in her career, and I was like, I want to be her. She's my best friend. I want to wear her sweater. She's super cool, but that TED Talk on vulnerability is really a great one for moms. And there's that building resilience in children and teens, and I should give credit to the other author, Martha Jablow. So that's a really great one. That's kind of a lot on the same scope of how I feel. The Child Mind Institute is where I received some of the current statistics, but that's CBS primetime. If you have an extra 10, 15 minutes and you want to just see what I was saying about like how in the beginning this guy was like, this is what's going to happen, and now it's happening. And then if you're wanting to see if you're resilient, I put on some resiliency quizzes there for you. There you go. And then it would tell you an area that you can work on in that. So again, there's more than just that builds resiliency. I wanted to tailor this talk to be for you guys for being moms, and also for some of the things that I see with kids of where that resiliency is. But I know that some of the books and some of the other, there's so much information on resiliency now, grit, whatever that, all of that now, that you can find anything. So then there's some of the other organizations. And then lastly are your questions for your small group questions. So I thought, and again, I don't know how much time you guys have, but one of the things I was thinking about that you can reflect is, one was, are you taking the lead in role modeling healthy coping and resiliency? And what would you change? Like after today, what would you think you'd change in that? And then what would be your ideal self-care regime? Like I feel like heal or heal thyself. You know, how are you gonna be a mom if you're not being the best you and taking care of you? How can you integrate more self-care to reach your self-care goals? So what are your goals, right? And then what are 3 of the resiliency characteristics you'd like to build stronger within your family? So that's that family mission statement of like, what would be those 3 characteristics? And you can take that home, and then with your significant other, you can work on what does that look like, and what do they think are the 3? If you want to get them involved, like, what do you think of the 3? First of all, ask him if he knows what resiliency is, and then you can be really smart, right? And then lastly, like I said, what are you grateful for? And so yeah, wonderful. Any other questions? Thank you for having me. Long overdue. Good, yes, thank you. Stick around for a few minutes in case anyone has any questions or wants to chit chat.